want to say thank you to everyone for coming out today. This is the first of what we hope will be a series of activities to bring the Oliver and Friends community together on a regular basis. And what better way to celebrate in September than to host a Latinx panel with some of my favorite friends. So I want to thank the panelists for their participation tonight. But before I say much more, I'm going to introduce esteemed Oliver alum Jeff Garcia, who is going to moderate and lead this evening's discussion. Oh, by the way, I'm the CEO. My name is Danielle Moss.
Thank you, Danielle. I just want to thank Danielle for asking me to be a part of this. I know a few faces in the room. Hopefully, I'll know a few more by the end of this. As she mentioned, I'm Jeff. I graduated class of 2009 as far as Oliver from the Westtown School. That's my best friend, Johnny. He also graduated from 2009. We had plans to go to Filson, but we had to split up. I hope you weren't hurt by that. Graduated from the University of Richmond and just recently graduated from Fordham with a master's in nonprofit leadership. So here I am practicing leadership, see how I do. So very honored to be a part of this wonderful guest. I know Wendy from my relationship with Johnny because that's his god sister. So it's cool to have that connection. So just welcome, so yeah. So are you guys ready for the real tough question of the day? Danielle, are you up here? So the hard question of the day. Let's see how you guys master this one. Just introduce yourselves. See what's up. And just tell us about where you currently work, your role in the organization, or whatever endeavor you're associated with, and yeah, just go from there.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dianne Morales. I am the CEO of Phipps Neighborhoods, an anti-poverty organization in the South Bronx. I am a first-generation college graduate, Boricua, from a working-class family, born and raised in Bed-Stuy, where I have raised my own children. And I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. I'm also running for mayor of New York City in 2021.
This is the first time that I've ever introduced myself after someone who just said, I'm running for mayor of New York City in 2021. I feel like there's nothing I could possibly say, so I'm just gonna, no. My name is Eddie Gonzalez-Novoa, and I currently am the co-founder of an organization called Energizing Health. We're based out of New York City and Austin, and basically what we do is we work with community initiatives to help kind of amplify their work around health disparities and health equity by connecting them with large health partners and small tech startups. I've done a little bit of everything over the course of my career. I've known Dianne from the very beginning, so this is, I think, the first time we've ever been on a panel together, so it's exciting to be on a panel with you and kind of making new friends at the same time, so thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Zenaida Mendez. I am the director of M&A in El Barrio Firehouse Community Media Center. We are the largest public access television station in the United States. Oh, wow. And the best one in Manhattan. So the main thing that we do is to teach community residents how to do their own television production. So our program runs from 14 years old to 125. So we have a youth media center, we have a senior program, we have a middle-aged program. You would like to do television, you would like to know how to use a camera, how to use our studio. For the young people, it's completely free. For the more mature crowd, it's only $25 per courses. Once you've done the classes with us, you can use everything free. You can research the studio, you can take out the equipment, and you can do your own production. We have 5 television channels. We also do collaboration with BronxNet, with Brick TV, with all the other public access center, which is important. I also, people know me because I'm the former president of the National Organization for Women in New York State. And also the founder of the Dominican Women Caucus, among other things. I'm a proud mom of 3 daughters and a proud grandmother. So thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I'm just happy to be sitting next to all of them at this point. It's just kind of cool. A lot of good things are happening. I'm Wendy Garcia. I'm going to introduce myself as Johnny Araujo's sister, who is an Oliver Scholar. So you can give him a round of applause. And Jess Tia, which I think are the coolest titles more than anything else. But I'm also the Chief Diversity Officer for the City of New York. And I work in the Comptroller's office to look at systemic racism through the lens of regulation, policy, investments, and contracts. And a lot of the work that we do in our office is really focused on how we can take the work of the Comptroller's office, authority, its audit power, its finance, and question how government and municipal government functions within the fabric of diversity. What does it mean? It means that every year we put out a report and we ask the main question, which is, are agencies doing business with women and people of color? And I'll leave it there because I don't want to take up all the time, but you can guess the answer to that.
All right, so first question is, what are some of the challenges facing Latinx New Yorkers, and how are each of you working to reduce those disparities in our community? So.
Well, we have, in my opinion, a lot of challenges. The Latinx, I think the first challenge that we have is how do we organize the community? I think that several years ago, everyone went after the Latinos in organizing. Right now, I think that we are falling behind in many aspects. When it comes to the media, and I'm going to direct my thing to the media since I'm in the media, as you know, our main 2 television station network, both are not owned by Latinos. Therefore, the interest is not Latino. I remember in 2016, during one of the presidential debate, there was a soap opera in Univision and Telemundo. The lack of information, misinformation that come to our community, I think is putting us behind. So that's a challenge. How do we organize? How do we regroup? How do we get the Latinx, the next generation, know that it's critical for us to use the media? It is important. And we're not going to talk about Afro-Latinas because I don't see myself in any of the Hispanic television station. So it's a challenge there. We don't have a major newspaper. Several years ago, every candidate would seek to be endorsed by El Diario La Prensa. We don't have El Diario La Prensa anymore. We have a smaller newspaper. So therefore, we do not count when it comes to a presidential race, to a mayor race. Everyone who used to go to those newspapers to make sure that they were endorsed, that is not happening. So we are not getting the information the way we should do. So this is why I think it is critical. The media is critical, local and national. That's one of the challenges. The other challenge is the school. I mean, without education, we are not going anywhere. So that is, I'm talking about from pre-K to always encourage our kids to go to college. You know, you need a college education in order to move forward. And we have to encourage our kids to love all kind of study, all kind of arts. I love film and television. I've been doing this for many years. I was on the board of M&N in the 90s. I have my own television program now. I'm so happy that I'm where I am, where I can give the opportunity to our young people to do media, to learn about the importance, to tell our story our own way. Don't let somebody else tell the way it is. Our voices are important. So that's a big challenge for, in my opinion, among others. But education is critical, media is critical, especially in New York State. I mean, where everybody's getting information, we watching soap opera, you know, it is, moving us, and not any kind of soap opera, because it's not based on social justice issues. It's soap opera making something else. So this is important. So I encourage young people to look at the media, to look at being a journalist, do film, documentary. We have to tell our own story. We have a second and third generation, and we have people like Yolanda Sanchez, like Ali Cardona, so many heroes and sheroes that we don't know what they've done in our community. And we need to document that. We have Dr. Marta Moreno Vega. So it's so many people that we need to tell the story our own way. So that's, to me, that's a big challenge.
I completely agree with Zenaida. I would say that there are, one of the things that I see in my profession is that there are structural barriers that exist within government that are just, systemic racism is a very real, it's very real, exists in the way we do our regulation and our language. And so what does it mean? It means that when we look at the city's $19 billion, only 5% of that is going to women and minorities. It means that when you look at the nation's Fortune 500 companies and you're questioning who are the board of directors, who's making the decision, less than 2% are Latino. And so a lot of the work, just to go back to your question, what are we doing in our respective roles to address this? A lot of the work that we're doing in our office is that we're using the authority of our corporate governance unit within the comptroller's office to ask investors who's sitting on their board. And if they do not want to disclose with us, then we won't do business with them. That's sort of the bottom line, what's happening in our office. And we've seen a great move. When I first got in the office, the comptroller announced that we were going to question the composition of boards. It meant that everyone was going a bit crazy, as you can imagine, saying like, well, why do we have to disclose this? We've never had to disclose it before. And you name it, there were editorials about why the comptroller was going crazy over diversity. But what we found is that in the last 4 years and last 5 years of us doing this, we've seen over 60 new directors on board seats, people of color and women. This is shifting the way companies are making decisions. And it was through the leverage of our office that we were able to push this through a national agenda. When we graded city agencies and we grade the city a D grade, and we looked at every single agency and we asked them, did you do business with a woman? Did you do business with Latinos? And the answer was no, and we repeatedly got the 5%. What did we do? We came up with 4 to 5 recommendations. This is how we need to structurally change government. And out of the many recommendations, one of the things that we're most proud of in our office is that we changed the Constitution in the last 3 months to reflect what's currently the MWB program. And not only did we constitutionalize that program, which it wasn't inside of the city's charter. And just to tell you why this is so critical, it's because it was the first time in the 10 years that that program finally had sustainability. And on November 6th, in the next 3 months, you all will be going to the voting booth, and you're going to be able to vote on whether this program needs to stay within city government. What does it mean for you? It means that no matter who's the mayor, no matter who's the governor, no matter who is the comptroller, this is beyond this concept of having one administrator. You will always have funds for those programs. So we've been trying to change and operationalize diversity and the way diversity works inside of municipal government.
So I think about this, there's a couple of things that come to mind. Zenaida referenced the education piece, the college attainment rates of Latinas, Latinos, Latinx. It trails way behind the African American population. I think we only do better than the Native American population, and that's not saying very much, right? So one of the things that we do that in our work at Phipps Neighborhoods is to really focus on the college access piece. And you can't start that conversation in the 10th grade with our young people, right? We talk a lot about sort of acting at it, sort of modeling our work after middle-class families, right? Middle-class families start talking to their kids about college when they're 3. Right, there's just that assumption. The conversation sets up the expectation and the assumption that that's where you're going, right? As opposed to an afterthought, right? Which is what our education system is doing for our children these days. So that's a big thing that we really look to focus on and to change that mindset. I think about single parent households in New York City in particular, right? There is a disproportionate number of Black and brown single parent households that are led by women, right? And what does that mean in terms of economic sustainability? What does that mean in terms of raising our children? What does that mean in terms of the workplace? And so those are the kinds of things that I think making changes, making policy changes on that front actually will make a really big difference, because I believe that, you know, when we take care of our women, the women in the city, women take care of their communities. Women lift everybody up. You know, the idea that a rising tide lifts all boats. If we can help our women do better, then everybody's gonna benefit, right? Not just the immediate people in that family, but everyone around it. Because I think, as we demonstrate, you know, we do okay, and we turn our focus to how do we help others, right? That's a critical piece. The other thing when I think about, you know, the Latino population in particular is our girls, the suicide rates, it's an epidemic. It is a problem, right? So all of these other systemic issues are taking a toll on our young girls in a way that is, again, disproportionately impacting mortality. Right, and so mental health services, being able to provide access to that, being able to create a space, you know, there is a little bit of a stigma, I think, still in our communities around these issues, around acknowledging feelings of sadness or depression or, you know, the ideas of self-harm. And I think removing that stigma and then being able to find a way to provide help and support to our young girls in particular is a critical thing. Because those rates have skyrocketed in recent years, and it's an increasing problem. And so access to mental health services and supports and destigmatizing that, I think, is another issue that we need to be addressing.
I definitely agree with everything that's been said, and the only two things I would add is that I think two things. One is I think that we're living in a very unique time, and I find that a lot of the Latinx, as many other communities, are in the position of playing defense. We feel like our backs are against the wall, our backs are against, I'm gonna use all these inappropriate kind of sports metaphors because I'm not a sports person, but anyway, that feeling of kind of being up against the ropes, you know, with the whole discussion around kind of refugees and immigration in this country has made people very, very afraid enough to not be counted in the census, afraid enough to not get the services that are due to them, afraid enough to not be able to kind of provide for their families in ways that we've been doing for generations. That's always been a challenge, but I feel like it's kind of been dialed up for many communities, not just the Latinx community. In my work, I do a lot of work around health, and I think about those issues a lot. There's been, I think, a lot of the discussions in the past few years, past decade, has really focused on affordable health care. And I feel like affordable health and care are only part of the issue. It's not just about being affordable, it's about being accessible. A lot of people who can afford health care aren't getting it because of discrimination, because of other barriers that have nothing to do with having the insurance. Even if you are a trans woman with health insurance, there's a high chance that you will not be seen by a doctor, and if you are seen by a doctor, that you won't get the treatment that is due to you, and if you do, that there's a high chance you'll have to stay in the closet in order to get that treatment. That has nothing to do with health insurance, and has everything to do with discrimination. I'm thinking about health more broadly, not just what happens when we get sick, but the kinds of things that make our communities healthy, not just as an individuals, not just my cardiovascular health, not just kind of my predisposition for cancer, but what is about the environment that I live in, the water that I drink, the air that I breathe, my access to having a good job or good education. All these things make our communities healthy, and I think we're now more starting to think about creative ways of or more comprehensive ways of thinking about health, which is funny to me because I stepped into this health field. I've done kind of public health in the past, but most of my career is in education, early childhood especially. And so when I hear people talking about things like social determinants and the different kind of factors that impact people's health, I'm thinking, oh, isn't that what we called the whole child for 30 years? Isn't that what, settlement houses have been doing in New York for hundreds of years? Isn't this what we call kind of multi-service agencies that drop-in centers and community clinics have been doing for decades? And so I'm excited that the health community is kind of like catching on board, but we've been kind of taking care of business for a long, long time. And so this is one of those areas where they have some catching up to do because we've been doing this for a long time. And I think we're kind of thinking more beyond just care and treatment and what happens in the hospital, but prevention and the kinds of kind of health interventions that have more to do with just medical devices and seeing a doctor. There's lots of ways that our communities have been doing this, and I think the more that we can support community initiatives around health, around different aspects of health, different access to health, I think the better off we'll be.
Thank you for that. How do we collectively create a college access pipeline, a better college access pipeline for our youth?
That's an easy question. I think it's actually so complex, right? I touched on it before when I mentioned the idea of orienting our children to college from a very young age, right? And having those conversations. But there, I think there's some practicalities that sometimes get in the way and make it challenging. Connected to my comment about women and wages, women are, particularly in New York City, I'm just going to focus on New York City. We are the frontline workers, right? We're women of color, Latinas, make the city run, right? And so, and we're running the city, but that doesn't mean we're making a lot of money. And so there are economic challenges and that I think end up pulling on our children in many instances where there's a tension between education, the pursuit of education, and the attainment of income, right, to support and help supplement the family income, and that's a challenge. So I really think that we're not going to be able to address the higher education access problem in isolation without addressing the economic situation of the low-income women in our city. That being said, I think it is important for the programs where, that are touching the lives of children and youth to have that college-going mentality and to provide the access, the support, and the resources to help our young people understand what's available to them, right? There is such a demystification that needs to happen for our families around the whole college process, right? Understanding that there's financial aid available, right? So many parents there's language barriers and other things, but just assume that college is not for us. It's not attainable, it's not accessible, we can't do that. There's issues around, how much information do I have to reveal for the financial aid, forms? And well, we're not documented, or we have, these other issues, and we don't want to put that stuff out there. There's issues around, she can go to college, but it has to be in New York, right? Not sending my child away. My child has to be here. And there's all of these fears around that. And we run a college access program at Phipps Neighborhoods. We spend almost more time with the families, helping them to understand the realities and, again, demystifying all of that for them than we do with the children. Because generally the students are kind of excited about the idea, right? They like the idea of being able to go to college and being able to attain that. But mom's not going to let me do that, right? Or daddy doesn't think I can go away. And so really, really our responsibility as educators, as youth development, as social service providers, is to really sort of engage and sort of couple our strategies, not just with the college-going generation, but with the generation that supports them at home.
The two things that come to my mind is, I guess the first thing is helping students and families to understand the culture of college. My parents came to New York from Puerto Rico when they were 10, 12 years old. My mom ended up going to college when she was 60, long after her sons went to college, because she always had that love of learning. But they came to this city with an immigrant mentality that if you work hard, the system will reward you. And so you kind of stay diligent, you get good grades, and good things will happen. And so that was my understanding. That's how college works. Had no idea that there's a whole nother system, a whole nother culture going on about how students interacted with adults, administrators, and faculty, about getting references. I remember applying for graduate school. I had already gotten into Princeton, and now as I'm applying to graduate school, you think I would know my way around. It never occurred to me till my senior year that I had nobody to ask for a recommendation, and that all my friends and roommates had picked their classes since freshman year based on who they thought was going to write the best recommendation 4 years later. And I'm like, how did you know freshman year that you'd be going to law school? And they're like, well, because that's why I went to the junior high school that I went to. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And so there's all these layers about negotiating grades and using office hours and having coffee with the professor. And I came from a public school mentality that, the instructors were here, and, if I didn't get a good grade, that's on me. If I turned in my paper late, that's on me. Never occurred to me to negotiate a deadline or negotiate a grade. And even my most supportive professors understood that that's how the way the system worked, and knew how to work with students who worked in that way. And I just didn't learn until long after the fact. The other thing that I would say is that I think that one of the best things we can do, and I'm coming from now a tech background, I want to encourage all of our students who are interested in the sciences to go into the sciences, but I'm going to make a heavy push for the liberal arts. My oldest brother was a rocket scientist as a kid, and he now works for NASA. His path was set. My second oldest brother was an artist as a kid. He went to Cooper Union. He's a photographer now. He runs the arts department at Queens College. His path was set. Then I came along. I didn't have a set path. I didn't know what schools to apply to or what to major in, because I didn't have that end of the road destination that my brothers did. So I kind of figured out as I went along. I studied religion. I studied dance. I ended up auditioning for the Alvin Ailey School when I graduated, and then also being recruited for the Franciscans to join an order. And I ended up working at a daycare center, which led to a career in early childhood. Although I kept dancing for a few years, and I auditioned for the Metropolitan Opera when I got to New York. And so I was like, I'm just going to keep. So welcome to my 5th incarnation. I've never had a job for more than 5 years, my entire career. I always describe my career as it's a portfolio. I think of myself like like an artist. Here's my resume. You'll see kind of pages of kind of different things that I've done, and I just keep kind of layering all the things that I found interesting and kind of braiding them together into what I now call a career. I would like to say that I planned it from the very beginning, but the only reason why I'm able to do what I do now is because I had the support of my family and my friends to explore things that may not have made me a lot of money. And I know that was hard for my parents at first. Okay, you're gonna study dance, and then they're like, okay, we sent you to college so that you can study dance, because in their mind, Princeton was a really good trade school. You go to get a job, and then I kind of bucked the whole system, but they let me, and so I know it's hard on them, as is for many of the students and former students and families in this room.
Well, I see two things going on when it comes to education. I see that we constantly have new people from Latin America, so it is critical to make education a priority. Most people come here, they think about working. I understand they have to put food on the table, they have to pay rent, but we have to make sure that they make education a priority. It's not going shopping every weekend with the little money that you get. I went to college after I had my 2 first daughters. I got married when I was 18 years old, but my parents always wanted me to go to college. I want to go to college. So I went to school. I went to Kingsborough Community College, then I transferred to John Jay. And I was going to school when my kids went to school. They were in kindergarten, pre-K, and I was doing my BA. Then I did an internship in housing conservation coordinators. That's also important. I walk in my neighborhood. I used to see that big office with that yellow door. I say, I wonder what they do there. And then when it came time for me to do an internship, I knock on the door. What do you do? Oh, we do advocacy for tenants' rights. So I did an internship there that spring of 1980 something. And then my oldest daughter is here. So then they offered me a job. So I worked there for 4 years. 2 blocks from where I live. My kids went to school across the street. So it is important, education. When you have that, you want to do that education. I got involved in the community. I got involved in my community board. So I became chair of the steering committee, Community Board 4, the only Latina, the only black Latina in Community Board 4, Clinton and Chelsea. I got involved in my community. In 1986, David Lincoln became borough president. I get a call from Lily Cariño. Some of you might know her. And she said, I didn't even know Lily in person, but she used to call the office, and I said, I need an organizer, I need a tenant organizer. I used to say, said, well, we only go up to 59th Street, but you're in 86. I will send you somebody, don't worry. And so she said, you have to go and work for David Lincoln. I never thought working for an elected official, because I was always picketing against Ed Catch and everybody. And Dianne Morales came to interview me across the street from ACC.
Not this one.
Not this one. That was another special Dianne Morales. She used to be my boss in the borough president office. So I worked for David Lincoln for 4 years. Then I worked for him when he was in the mayor's office. Why? Because I got involved. I knew the neighborhood. So that is important too. So it's never too late. So we constantly getting new people from everywhere in the world. So you dream to be an attorney, you dream to go to medical school, do not stop because you come to the United States. Make yourself a priority to educate yourself. And we had to do a campaign in the Latino community for parents to make college a priority and education a priority. What the mayor is doing right now with the specialized school is critical. I have my youngest daughter went to La Guardia, high school. My oldest daughter went to Catholic school from pre-K all the way to Iona College. And my second one, the same thing. They went to a very good public school because I was constantly finding out where's the school. That was my priority. Not buying the new sneakers, not buying the new lady pants. My priority for them to get an education because I didn't want them to go to school after they had kids like I did. I wanted them to go. When my daughter was in 5th grade, she was so disappointed because she thought she was going to Columbia University. Immediately, I said, no, you still have to go to high school. So when I hear her say, I'm going to Columbia University, I say, hey, Dora, you have to go to high school first. But that's what you want, for your kids to completely skip high school and go straight to college, because at least you know they're going to go to college, And, if you don't, I had a situation, we had a college counseling program, the Dominican Women's Organization, and I had a kid who had a full scholarship to Colgate University. The parents said, oh no, she's a girl, she's not going over there. We had to take the entire family one weekend to Colgate so they can see how was it going to be, where she was going to stay, and they finally let her go. Just because she was a girl, would it have been the boy, it would have been okay. I mean, can you believe? Let go a full scholarship to Colgate just because you are a girl? So we still have to fight a lot of stigma, even in 2019. But I have to say, the Latinx that I know, they all into getting education for the kids. I am so proud when I see the new generation so focused and making sure that their kids are going to get a good education. Because if they love going to school, they're going to be, especially the girls, they're going to be independent. They don't have to put up with what. No abuses, because they're going to be independent. They're going to be able to make choices and to be in charge of their life, which is important. So I think that we have to continue that path and making sure the New York City school, when I work for the mayor, the only decision, the only budget that the mayor can touch is the education, the board education. You know why? Because the millions so Latino and African American going to school parents are not organized. They're not going to take the money from the police officer. You know what happened to David Lincoln? 22,000 police officers came in the front of City Hall when he tried to make changes in the police department. All right? You're not going to take money from the sanitation department. You know who's there. So it is important that we organize, and I believe that the reason why we don't have now, we used to have a school board. That was like the first way to learn how to run for office here. They took that away from us. The only thing that you needed was to have one child in public school, doesn't matter whether you were documented or undocumented. That was taken away from us. So we need to organize the parents. We need to take back the education system. We need to start the waste of money at the education administration and give it to the kids, give it to the school. That's what we have to do.
I agree. I wanted to offer a little, just a different perspective around pipeline, and just to tell you just a story about, I'm going to use John Antonio, your story. For John Antonio, who's in the audience, who's also an Oliver Scholar, it was actually interesting watching him grow up, because we grew up in the same household. Same mom, but two different moms at the same time. My madrina is his mother. So I had two moms growing up, his mom and my mom. And you can really see the difference in the change of, the difference in the education system. John Antonio, having come to the Oliver program, was afforded a lot of opportunities that me and my god sisters, his sisters, did not have. And you can see the clear difference in whether he was playing the saxophone, that I really wish he didn't play when he was 4, but whether he was playing the saxophone and he had that opportunity to explore musically, whether he loved to do that, right? And then if you looked at the flip side of that, I was playing, I think at that point it was like this little flute, because I went to the public school, right? So I went to the public school, the recorder. Yes, I don't think we had flutes. Playing the recorder, even though we grew up in the same house, in the same neighborhood, on the same block, we did the same thing. We had dinner the same way. I had dinner in his house every day. I was sleeping over. We had the same exact life. And what really, what got John Antonio to George Washington and made him the top of his class, and even though I did pretty good, right? I ended up at the University of Delaware, but I think there were some real differences in resources that I always say that if I had the know-how that he had at his age, I was like, I would have ran for president already. I'm like, I would have been done. Because what these programs provided for him in talking about pipeline, and I would say the same for Jeff, was Jeff grew up 3 blocks away from us. It was 180-something street, 10 blocks away from us, is access to networks. And it's so critical, particularly for Latino families, to have that access. I remember graduating from college and calling my madrina, who was involved in the school board, who knew Zenaida at the time, and saying, well, I just graduated, I need a job. Like, what am I gonna do? And what was my mom gonna do? Connect me with a friend who worked at the Chase Bank, doing quality control? What was my uncle gonna do? Get me a job as a cab driver? Because that's where he had his networks. And I think what sort of changes that dynamic is when you have programs like Oliver, and when you have programs that offer young Latinos a pipeline of professionals for them to connect to, and that those professionals open up the door. Which is what happened to me during the time that I was that I had graduated. My godmother made a call to her friend Raisa Castillo, who I don't know if you guys know her, who made a call for me, and she didn't know. She knew I was my godmother's, but that's what she did. She was a sponsor that knew there was a young Latina who was coming up, who needed to get employment, because that's what you want once you graduate from college, and you need to open the door. So I think a lot of the commitment that we all have to have in the room, including everybody sitting here, alumni alike, is you have to open the door for someone. And it's not enough to sit there and say, well, they're not opening up the door. We have these connections. We're at a point right now where Latinos are the largest graduating bodies across the nation. We're not in a place anymore where we can afford to say, oh, we're not graduating enough. The pipeline is there. We're available, particularly Latina women. Are graduating from college at an enormous rate. So at this point, it's about opening the door. What happens when you have someone who has 3 degrees and no job entry? And that to me is where pipeline exists, because once you get the school experience and you get the academics, you need to be able to network yourself into your industry, which is why I agree with Zenaida so much about this part about community engagement. It is so critical for you to get involved in your community for different reasons, because giving is good and that's part of a life purpose, but also because you are going to learn from other professionals. And in a family where I'm going to assume in a family, particularly Latino families who are traditionally coming from impoverished communities, those networks are also impoverished. And so you have to take yourself, kind of eject yourself out of that system and place yourself in another family, in another network, which is really what happened to me, which I'm very grateful for that, because for me, that was a launching pad. Once I went into the borough president's office, I got hired. I moved into working for the mayor, and after working for the mayor, now the comptroller. And I don't think any of that would have been possible unless someone really knocked down the door. I mean, literally, like, pulled it open, pushed me in, and even when I wasn't qualified, I didn't have all the 10, 5, 15 years of experience doing anything, they were like, go. Good luck. Call me when you make it. And then the next person came in and did the same thing. So for me, it's really critical that as we're building pipeline, we're building not just mentors, but we're building people that are pushing doors open for people.
The audience has any comments? Yeah.
One of a few of my friends who are all Latinx women, we went apple picking this weekend, and we were discussing the topic, and one of the topics that came up was colorism and talking about purifying the race. So I don't know if anybody knows what purifying the race is, but it's taught to a lot of Hispanic families early. It's like marry lighter, marry whiter, so that we can purify the race, so that we can, you know, take out the black, like take out the blackness, the color of the skin. My mother is Hispanic. She's Puerto Rican. My brother and I are the only dark ones. So, like, all of my cousins are light. Everybody is, like, light. And we're, like, you know, brown. And so there's always been a different treatment. My daughters are brown, and in school, like, everybody is Spanish. So it's like, oh, mommy, but their hair is like this. But we speak Spanish, too. But, you know, like, we're different. And so I think it's important to point out not only ideals like purifying the race, but that they're being taught at a very young age, at 4 and 5, that we're different because we're darker. And so I just like to offer this topic to speak.
Thank you.
I guess I just want to add that if you look at the way history has played out itself in the Caribbean and across the nation, the concept of blackness has always been demonized across the board. And so we have to sort of start there. Particularly in the Latino community, it is no different from any other community where you have social constructs of what beautiful looks like and what it doesn't look like. That being said, we are at a time right now where we're seeing large movements around embracing blackness. And I'm going to talk about curly hair just for a second, clearly, because I have curly hair. And if you look at how young women are raised, this concept of desrizados, the concept of blow drying your hair every weekend, putting your rolos on, the amount of money that we spend on straightening our hair, it has, I'm just going to sort of the very microscopic just part of how we have been programmed to really think about how everything that is not reflective of whiteness is not good, right? It's not good. So we have to straighten our hair, we have to blow dry it, we have to do all these things that make us more beautiful according to society structure. That being said, we are at a really great time where you have salones like Miss Rizos that are coming to Washington Heights. I'm gonna give her a plug. That is, I'm like, that is celebrating our heritage. But the truth is that we come from countries that have been colonized to believe that anything that is originally from our own country is not a good thing. If you look at, I'm just going to talk about Dominican Republic because that's the history that I know, some of the history I know. The majority of Dominicans who grow up here in the United States cannot tell you what happened in Dominican Republic. I'm one of them, by the way, when I grew up here. When you begin to learn that when my mother was 4 years old, there was a dictator that pretty much told everybody that even if they mentioned that they were black, that they would be killed, you have a second, like, oh, okay, I get it. I get why you have a culture of people that don't want to have this discussion. When you begin to understand that that dictator was put there by the United States, and no one wants to talk about that either, and it was placed there so that the United States can further oppress the Dominican Republic, you start questioning where all of these things are coming from. And so a lot of the work that we have to do now is we have to teach, I tell you my kids, because I have an 8-year-old and I have an 11-year-old and we go to the same school, is teaching them their original history. That was taken away from us. That's a story that we are not taught, not here in the United States when we're going to school, and we're not, and Dominicans are not taught that history in Dominican Republic. So I think it's critical that we do a lot of work historically around where we're from, where our culture was created. And even though there's this joke like toditos somos negros atrás de los oídos, there's this constant joke about that. It's not a joke. We're black. That you can't be from the Caribbean and not be black. Like, it's just, the two do not go together. And because there's been so much immigration here to the United States, a lot of Dominicans are facing the concept, the colorism concept that exists in the United States. So you're dealing with the historical layer around the dictatorship in Dominican Republic. And then you're dealing with the history here around slavery. And I think that is something that once we start teaching young people and kids that are growing up about that concept, we're gonna start seeing more movement around them just loving themselves and who they are, because this is really about creating self-hatred.
Well, as the only Afro-Latina sitting at the table.
Well, I'm Afro-Latina today. Thank you. If you wanna talk
Yay! I love the way everybody jump. I love it. Well, just like you said, everybody identify themselves as black, which is great. But I tell people I go through this every single day as a black Dominican. When I walk in the door and with a heavy accent, when I walk in the door any place, they don't know my name, they haven't heard me speak, they assume I'm African American, which I'm very proud of that assumption. But when they hear Zenaida Mendez, oh, where are you from? I lived in California for a few years, and I remember they said, "Where did you learn to speak Spanish?" I said, "No, that's my native language." That's my native language. But here, and I'm going to be very blunt, here in New York City, you have a group of Latinx who really, un chorrito de blanquitas, they think they are blanquitas, that really reject las negritas. And you can see I had 3 black daughters. I don't know which one had dated any Latinos. No, they won't ask them. They will not. Ask by a Latino to go out. That's the reality. Because they're dark. That's the reality. All right, so we had the history in Dominican Republic, as you know, Trujillo, who killed 45,000 Haitians and then paid $1 million to Haiti. And to this day, a lot of people don't want to talk about that. You know, a lot of changes in the art, but we still bring that with us here. The same thing with the African American. They also like to marry lighter. All right, and I can name a whole bunch of them. Okay, so we have to be real. We have to, we have to be real. Okay, so, and like I said, that's why I go to school. I have my 3 degree really prominent in my wall. So they know I have an accent, I'm black, but I went to school. Okay? You have 300 million people who grown in the United States, speak perfect English, they don't have a degree. And I do have a degree. So that's why education is important. But we also have to understand that here, the Latinx, a lot of Latinx, could be Colombian, could be Ecuadorian, could be for any of the 20 countries, because you would think there are not black, I remember when I went to South Africa, because I went to the World Conference Against Racism. Our first meeting was in Ecuador, in Quito. So when we saw all those black Ecuadorians coming into the meeting, people say, oh my God, are they from Ecuador? The same thing in Venezuela, the same thing in Choco, Colombia. So there are black in every Latin American country. In Nicaragua, Bluefield, Nicaragua. All right? So we have to understand they need it, and that's why I also go back to the media. When you see all the commercial in the media, even in DR, I don't see, you are advertising Dominican Republic and you don't have a black person in that commercial? When the majority of people serving, you're gonna be black? All right, so we have to start having this conversation. When you have a novela, every night you don't have una indígena en la novela, una negra en la ahora, de sirvienta sí, pero no del papel prominente en la novela. So we have to talk about that, all right? It is important, and we have to make it because it happened here. I just went to Puerto Rico. You go to Puerto Rico, and now it's a little better, unfortunately, but it was like, los dominicanos allá, porque son negros. One of my best friends, Olga Coto, una negra puertorriqueña, live in Puerto Rico. Every day she had to say, no, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm not Dominican. Because they assume all the black are Dominicans. All right? The same thing here. The same thing here. So it's like you go to an event, and I went to an event in Washington Heights, and I remember somebody said to me, oh, this is Washington Heights? I don't see any black Dominican here. Okay? So here in New York City is this, a lot of the new generation continue with the same thing. All right, rejecting the darker Latinos. And that's a reality. And we have to, be proud of our heritage, be proud of what we do, and education is the key. Knowing the history, everyone came from Mother Africa at the end of the day. That's the first continent.
The only thing I would want to add to that, if I could even, is I think there's lots of kind of dimensions to this kind of anti-blackness, and part of it is that I think for a lot of Latinx people, we define ourselves not just against people who are darker than us, but also people who are lighter than us, that we are not white. And so what happens is, for many of us, and I say us, light-skinned people, we don't own up to our light-skinned privilege. And so it's not just our attitude towards black Latinx people or black non-Latinx people, but kind of saying that I move through the world as a light-skinned person, and so I need to take responsibility for that. That gives me access, that gives me privileges, that gives me responsibility and obligations to my larger community. And so when I see people, or even kind of see these kind of attitudes in myself kind of pop up, like, oh, we are all one kind of brown people. Now I was like, okay, this kind of all brown lives matter attitude kind of assumes that we all move through the world the same way and that we are one. I'm all for unity, but I think there's a way of kind of acknowledging that we can be one and still kind of acknowledge that in our difference, if I don't acknowledge the fact that as a cis, somewhat masculine presenting, older, light-skinned Latin man with Ivy League credentials and certain networks that I've been exposed to, I move through the world with a certain amount of privilege, while also moving throughout the world with a certain amount of lack of privilege for at the same time. And I think that kind of nuance is hard for a lot of particularly kind of cis male, particularly light-skinned people to be able to sit with both in our community.
I'm conscious of time, but just a couple of thoughts on this topic. We've talked about a variety of different aspects of the internalized racism, right? Whether it's colorism, whether it's the texture of your hair, or the width of the bridge of your nose, because that's the other thing, right? Our features, all of those things that people associate with blackness, and how we internalize that and how we sort of wield that in ways against each other. But the other thing that we didn't talk about so much is how much that stuff impacts and manifests in an economic sense, right? The barriers that get constructed for us in terms of access, a job, right? The fact that our hair is not legal in many places, in this country still. Those things act as real barriers to our communities being able to actually take care of itself and lift itself up, right? We focused a lot on our own internalized stuff, but there are some serious structural stuff that actually is keeping us from, rising above, right? And from becoming a sort of lifting up above all of this crap. I'm conscious of being on TV. And the other thing is, we've talked about this, but the education, right? The education system was also not created for us or by us. And so until we fundamentally change the way we educate our children, we can talk about this amongst ourselves until we're blue in the face, but there's a whole generation coming up behind us that is going to have the same ideals instilled in them, whether consciously or not, and that, those things begin to perpetuate and manifest in things that have real impact on our lives. And so, I just think it's all true that we've internalized these things. I also think that we need to stop beating each other up for that as much as we do, right? It's easier for us to sort of talk about it amongst ourselves. There are structures and systems that we really need to deconstruct. And as I said on a panel yesterday, just blow up because they are not meant for us. They weren't made by us. And they're doing exactly what they were intended to do.
Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to Danielle now for, to introduce the closing remarks. But I just wanted to thank the panelists for everything. I know we could probably continue to have these debates and discussions and have very fruitful dialogue. And I'm hoping that these discussions happen in future formal and informal settings. So thank you. So, yeah.
So first, I just want to say I feel so fortunate to have all of you in my life and in my circle. This social sector has come with lots of challenges, but it has certainly opened my life up into just some of the smartest people I've ever met.